All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Powering Florida Schools with Solar, Expanding Access to Savings, STEM Education and Job Training. We are excited for you to be here. We're giving people a couple minutes to sign in. So while we're doing that, I'll just go over a few reminders before we get started. So we will keep all attendees on mute throughout the session. And you can use the chat to communicate with events hosts if you're having any technical issues or have a private comment or question. For questions to the speakers, we do encourage everyone to type your questions into the Q&A section that you should see in your pop-up box. And other people can see those questions. We will be answering all questions at the end of the session, and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can. You will see other people's questions, so you can like or upvote those questions that you also want to hear answered. So that will help us identify and prioritize popular questions. And yes, there will be a recording of this webinar made available afterwards. Okay, I think we are ready to get started. So this webinar is brought to you today by Generation 180 and Solar United Neighbors. I'm Tish Tablan, Program Director of Generation 180, which is a national nonprofit organization based in Charlottesville, Virginia, whose mission is to inspire and equip people to take action on clean energy in their homes and communities. And I lead our Solar for All Schools campaign. Today, I'll be talking with you about the benefits of solar for schools and how solar projects in schools are most often funded, which is by third-party power purchase agreements, or PPAs. Then Heaven will tell you more about the upcoming opportunity in the Florida legislature to allow PPAs for schools, regardless of their budget, and to access solar and reap the financial and educational benefits. So I'll hand it over to Heaven.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. We have an excellent panel of speakers who are going to share with you experience in making this happen in their communities, as well as what this will look like in Florida. My name is Heaven Campbell. I am the Florida Program Director of Solar United Neighbors. We're a national nonprofit who helps people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights.
And also with Heaven and I today, we have 3 impressive school leaders who will share their solar journeys with you. First, we will hear from Mark Clinch, who is the Chief Facilities Officer at Osceola County School District in Florida, which boasts the first net zero energy school in the state. The next up is Dr. Peter GRETZ, Superintendent of Middlesex County Public Schools, which is the first in Virginia to power all of its schools with 100% solar. And after that, we'll hear from Dr. Gabriel Trujillo, Superintendent of Tucson Unified School District, the 3rd largest in Arizona. And as the largest solar energy producing school district in the state, they anticipate $43 million in energy savings over 20 years. We have a lot of exciting stories to share with you and can't wait to get started. Next slide, please. So before we get started with this webinar, I wanted to mention that this is the first of 2 events hosted by Generation 180 and Solar United Neighbors this week. So on Thursday, March 4th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be talking more about expanding solar in Florida. We will have the City of Orlando talking about its leadership in Florida with a commitment to 100% clean energy and how they plan to meet it. We'll also be hearing from the City of Atlanta and Macon-Bibb County in Georgia about their solar projects that would not have been accessible until Georgia passed legislation allowing third-party power purchase agreements. And today, Heaven will be talking more about the opportunity to pass a similar bill in the Florida legislative session that starts tomorrow. Next slide. For those of you who are not familiar with my organization, Generation 180 is a national clean energy nonprofit organization based in Charlottesville, Virginia. We focus on inspiring and equipping people to take action on clean energy in their homes, schools, and communities. So our webinar today is part of our Solar for All Schools campaign, which is leading a nationwide movement that will help schools reduce energy costs, enhance student learning, and foster healthier communities for all. With a school in every community, we leverage the integral role K-12 schools can play in reaching students, families, and neighbors, and in modeling the benefits of clean energy adoption. Next slide. Schools that go solar both receive many benefits and provide many benefits to the community. So going solar helps schools save on energy costs, which is especially critical this year as the pandemic has decimated school budgets. Schools use on-site solar energy systems as hands-on STEM learning labs and for preparing students for the fastest growing job in the country, a solar installer. Since schools are also used as emergency centers for communities after natural disasters, having solar and storage to power the building when the grid goes down is an important community asset. And Heaven will talk more about the job creation and economic impacts that solar can bring, particularly in Florida. Next slide. It's no wonder with all of these benefits to schools that the number of schools going solar nationwide is growing quickly. Last fall, we produced a national report, the Brighter Future Report, which you can find on our website. And through our research, we found that between 2014 and 2019, there was 139% growth of the cumulative installed solar capacity on schools. So it went from 560 megawatts to 1,337 megawatts in a 5-year time period. In that same period, the number of schools with solar installations grew 81%, from 4,061 to 7,332 schools. Next slide. So we can celebrate the great progress that's been made in helping schools go solar. However, out of the 130,000 K-12 schools in the country, only 5.5% have any solar. And some are demonstration systems used primarily for educational purposes, but they're not providing that benefit of reducing energy demand for schools and generating cost savings. So there's a tremendous missed opportunity to help schools affordably go solar in order to gain all the benefits that we talked about. Next slide. Our research found that 79% of the solar installed on schools nationwide was funded and owned by a third party, typically with no upfront costs to the schools. So only 7% was donated or grant funded, and those are mostly small educational systems. And only 14% was funded by bond, lease, cash, or via direct ownership by the schools. Mark from Osceola County School District will talk about how his net zero energy school was funded this way. But most often we see that school districts that have gone solar use a power purchase agreement with a third-party solar developer who pays for, owns, and maintains the system for a set amount of time, often 15 to 25 years. The school district, in this case, the school district doesn't purchase the panels, but instead purchases the energy produced by that system, and usually at a rate lower than what they would pay the utility. So this is how schools are able to afford going solar and see immediate energy cost savings. Next slide. The schools that were able to take advantage of third-party ownership or power purchase agreements must be in a state where it has been allowed by law. So power purchase agreements are allowed in 28 states and DC. And you can see from this map, the top states for solar and schools show up as navy blue. And 9 of the 10 top states explicitly allow third-party power purchase agreements, including California, Arizona, Virginia, New York, Massachusetts. However, Florida does not yet allow power purchase agreements. And sadly, the Sunshine State only ranks 24th in the nation for the amount of solar installed on schools. So we will be talking more about how we can fix that. Next slide. So in my home state of Virginia, where Generation 180 is based, we have a perfect example of what can happen when schools are allowed to use power purchase agreements to go solar with no upfront costs and realize immediate energy savings. So in 2013, a law was passed that created a pilot program in just one utility's territory, Dominion Energy, for up to 50 megawatts of solar using power purchase agreements. So once schools caught on to this opportunity to save on energy costs and go solar with no upfront costs, solar in schools really took off, particularly in the last few years. And now we estimate that there are over 30 megawatts of solar installed on Virginia K-12 schools, which is over 100-fold growth from where we started before PPAs were enabled. Next slide. And I'll just share one more example of what can happen with this type of financing. So Santa Barbara Unified School District in California looked for ways to become more resilient after wildfires and subsequent mudslides destroyed much of the county a few years ago. And the high school was used as an emergency shelter. The district is now using a PPA to fund 4.5 megawatts of solar on 14 school sites, 6 of which will include battery storage. So this project will be able to power critical loads when the grid goes down, and it will create $7.78 million in financial savings and provide an added value of resilience of $6.47 million. So we have a vision for these kinds of resilience projects to also become commonplace in Florida. Next slide. So next I'm going to hand it over to Heaven Campbell with Solar United Neighbors. But before I do that, I'll just share our website link where we have lots of resources to help schools go solar, including a how-to guide that walks you through the process step by step, an introduction to solar financing. And for the solar supporters on the line, we have a Solar Schools campaign toolkit that teaches you how to advocate for solar at your school. Thanks, Evan. Take it away.
Thank you so much. What a perfect stage you have set. And now I want to hone in rather on Florida and talk about what we're doing here. So again, I'm with Solar United Neighbors. We like to say we're a community of people building a new energy system, and we vision rooftop solar as the cornerstone of that new energy system. Next slide. So I want to just rehash again what power purchase agreements are, because they don't exist in our state. We get this question a lot, so it's worth revisiting. This is a financing mechanism, and what it allows is for large organizations, especially tax-exempt organizations who can't benefit from the tax credit, to avoid upfront costs for financing large solar systems. A third party is going to own and maintain that solar system for the host site, which takes a lot of ongoing maintenance and operations off of the host site as well. And then the clean energy supplier will sell electricity back to that host site. So that developer sells it back to the host site at a reduced rate, creating not only zero upfront costs, but immediate savings. And that developer is able to take the tax credit, which helps make this whole plan work out for both parties. Next slide. So here in Florida, as Tish mentioned, we explicitly do not allow power purchase agreements. And that's because of specific language that says that anyone who is sharing or selling kilowatt hours, any type of electricity, must be a public utility. So many other states, the majority of other states, either allow them on a case-by-case basis or have specific statutory language that allows power purchase agreements within that state. Next slide. So the first thing that we did when we were embarking on this campaign to help expand knowledge and awareness about power purchase agreements and how we could benefit from them here in Florida was to get with some people who could really pull the numbers and then plug those numbers in and see what it would look like in our state. So what we did was bring on board Dr. Stevens and Dr. Michaud from Ohio University and the University of Central Florida, and ask them to take a look at what this would look like for Florida and what the impact would be. So we have this report, and we'll put a link to our campaign webpage in the chat, and that's where you can find this report and also very specific one-pagers that are zooming in on different case studies within the report as well. Next slide. So on a state level, some of the projections that they came up with were, we looked at 3 different scenarios, a low, moderate, and high scenario. So this was kind of an immediate uptake, what would happen if they were legalized. The low scenario would be an additional 1.2 gigawatts of solar. A high scenario would be 2 gigawatts. And what would this mean as far as the different benefits from solar. Let's look at that. Next slide. So economic benefits, which is whenever we first were looking at this report, we didn't know the full impact that the pandemic would have. Now I think we're getting a better glimpse of that, although there's still, I'm sure, more impact to come and analysis of where we stand once this is all over with. But the economic benefits become more and more meaningful as we try to recover from this pandemic. So the low scenario, again, that was 1.2 gigawatts, that would have a one-time economic impact of $2.3 billion for our state. Now, this is just one time. Let's look at what this would mean annually. Next slide. So the annual residual impact in that low scenario would be $16 million a year. So those are big numbers, and that's just the low scenario. And we definitely erred on the side of conservative. Next slide. We are also ground zero for climate change here in Florida. So we knew that it was going to be really important to look at the environmental impact that this could have. So the annual greenhouse gas mitigation on the low scenario was 1.8 million pounds or tons of CO2 equivalent. So if we want to put this in layman's terms, what would that look like in, say, cars taken off the road? The low scenario, that would be 88,000 plus cars taken off the road annually. Next slide. So we also did some case studies to try and zoom in on what this would look like for real organizations. And we did work with these organizations to use their electrical usage and make sure that we were presenting real scenarios. Next slide. We looked at 3 different organizations. They also kind of followed the scenarios of large, medium, small. So one was the city of Orlando, that would be our large scenario. Medium was Osceola School District, and then small scenario was First Unitarian Church, also in Central Florida. And this is important because these are actually 3 actual organizations who stand to benefit from the legalization of PPAs. All of these are tax exempt organizations that not only could use, but need PPAs to help meet some of their already set goals. So if we want to zoom in on Osceola School District, right now they have a very large electrical consumption, which is not unusual for schools. And they have also a very large potential solar capacity. So they can install up to 2 megawatts of solar. The potential solar generation is just around 3% of their actual electrical consumption, but that also equals over $90,000 in energy savings per year. So although it's a small chunk of what they're currently using, they would be saving real money that they could then reinvest in the students. Next slide. So here is that data pulled out. So I want to draw your attention also to the total economic impact of construction is over $4 million. So while this is a zero upfront, zero taxpayer way for the school to immediately benefit, the school district to immediately benefit from solar energy and those savings, at the same time, it's also injecting economic stimulus right back into the local economy. Next slide. So I am going to hand it over now to Mark Lynch with said school district, and he can tell you what they have already done and how they did that.
Thank you, Heaven. So I'll start with my typical disclaimer. I'm not a salesman. I'm not here to sell you anything today. However, I am here to share golden nuggets of information that I hope that you can take back to your local school districts and use in a beneficial manner. So as Tish mentioned earlier, this is Neo City Academy, a STEM high school. It is the first net zero energy school in the state of Florida. So there you go. It is possible. You can do this. So I'm going to talk today about a smart way to do a solar project. And it starts with driving down EUI, energy use intensity. And that starts with the initial construction, where you're tightening the building envelope, right-sizing the mechanical system, efficient lighting system. So driving down that energy use intensity. Next slide, please. Why? Because we're looking to reduce our operational costs, because school districts spend over $6 billion a year. That's the highest operational costs that a school district has, second only to salaries. In our school district, 90% of our costs are utility costs, or the utility costs are electricity alone. So that is a big number and also a very big opportunity. Next slide, please. What is EUI, energy use intensity? So this is everything in the building that consumes power divided by square footage. The lower the number, the better. Just like a golf score, a lower number is better. And typical EUIs, next slide, please, are up on the top. So the national is 68, in our school district 65, our state of the state of Florida 55. With Neo City Academy, we were actually able to get the EUI down to a very low 16, and that made it possible to install rooftop solar and get all of the solar array on the roof. Whereas if this building would have been built to traditional standards, we would have covered the roof and we would have about 2 acres of additional solar, ground-mounted solar, to get this building to net zero energy. The building is actually net positive. We've installed a total of 650 solar panels, 470 are roof-mounted, another 96 on the dining canopy. The roof-mounted and the dining canopy get us to net zero energy, and the covered walkway contributes to our net positive goals. Next slide, please. So here are some case studies of our costs. The high performance alone, to tighten the building envelope, right-size the mechanical system, that was a 5.2% premium, an ROI of less than 5 years. So again, this is about minimal premiums, quick return on investment, significant operational savings. Next slide, please. So when you factor in the solar component to get our school to a net zero energy, and as I mentioned, we are actually net positive, that premium increases just a bit to 9.1%, less than 8-year return on investment. That really is fabulous. Our total savings with the high performance and zero energy component comes to over 115,000 annual savings. 20 years time span, that is a 3.2 million savings when you factor in all the maintenance savings as well. And keep in mind that this is not a very large school. This is less than 45,000 square feet, 500 student station. It does comply with all these state requirements for educational facilities and our cost per student station caps that we are held to in the state of Florida. And I'd also like to mention that we are not able to utilize PPAs. So our solar was self-funded on this project. And how we did that is by monitoring our project reserves very closely. Project reserves are for various project risk. And as we work through the project, those potential project risks that we had for site work did not come to fruition. We anticipated that we may have some steel, structural steel increases in the course of construction. So essentially, we were able to get through the project without having to touch our project reserves, and then made the decision to redirect some of those project reserves to fund the solar component so we could get this school to a full net zero energy. Next slide. So again, I really want to emphasize the lowering of the energy use intensity. Buildings leak. And so it's about minimizing the air leakage. It's about right-sizing the mechanical system, ultimately to reduce your energy footprint. Buildings leak. This is the voice of your father telling you to shut the door. He's not paying to cool the outside. But essentially, this is what we do every day in conventional buildings. Not to say that the buildings that we've built of years past were incorrect, but there is a better way, a more efficient way to build the buildings, and then ultimately have the opportunity to get that building to zero energy. And it starts with a shift in paradigm, shifting that mindset. I've heard so many times, why are we doing it this way? Well, because we've always done it this way. Well, there is a better and more efficient way to build buildings, to get them very tight, right size the mechanical, to ultimately lower that energy use intensity, significant operational savings, and then to add that solar component to get your school to zero energy. There is great synergy when high performance is coupled with solar to get a school to a full zero energy. Next slide, please. And why is zero energy a no-brainer in Florida? I won't read all of these, but I will highlight one of my top reasons is the large windows of PV generation. Keep in mind that our building is net metered, so all our surplus power goes back onto the grid. And that means large windows of PV generation on weekends, spring break, Christmas break, summer break, where all that excess power is going back onto the grid in the form of a credit. So that on an annual basis, with what you are consuming from the grid and what you're putting back onto the grid, that you are net zero energy. Another thing I love about our school is the ability to use the solar component as a teaching tool. We actually have an energy dashboard that our students use routinely to complete classroom assignments, where they can, at any given time, go to our energy dashboard, get live information to see what the building is consuming and what the building is producing in terms of solar. Again, this is a great way to get to a zero energy, allows you to utilize the roof, provides adequate footprint for that solar, but it starts with first driving down that energy use intensity. Next slide, please. This slide I call the unintended consequence. When we set off to build this project, it was not our goal to win lots of awards and receive recognition. We've received 11 prestigious awards. We've been published 19 times in most every trade publication. So that is a nice benefit to this project. But what it does is it confirms that we are on the right track, that we are doing what's right for the building sciences moving forward. Next slide. This is my email address. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. With that, I'll turn it back over to Heaven.
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to speak briefly to what this all means for Florida. We actually do have several bills that are moving through our legislative session that starts tomorrow that are seeking to open this up for our state. So if anybody wants to get connected on what that looks like for Florida and what we are working on, I put the campaign webpage into the chat, and I know that we'll also have our emails available at the end so that you can get connected. And I'm going to hand it over to Tish to introduce Dr. GRETZ.
Actually, go ahead, Dr. GRETZ, and get started.
Thank you, Tish. And Mark, that was great. A lot of the information that I'll share is probably going to be very reminiscent of the experience that Mark shared. I'm really thrilled to be able to tell this story about our division becoming a fully powered division by on-site renewable energy. And this first picture in this slide, I really like this because it shows just how integrated the solar panels are into the life of our schools. That's a shot of an elementary school during recess. Kids are playing soccer, and you can see the panels are right behind them. And it just has become a part of the school campus, a part of the school experience, recognized by our community as well. I know my time is brief, so I'm going to jump right in. Just want to give you a few quick comments about Middlesex County, where I am in Virginia. We're on the eastern end of Virginia, right on the water, a very small county, about 10,000 people. We're surrounded by water on all sides, a lot of waterfront homes, sailing. During the summer months, our population quadruples with people who own second homes and vacationers. We're very, very rural. Our schools serve about 1,200 students, and there's very little economic development or growth on the horizon in Middlesex, which is important for you to know because most of the support for any initiatives that we want to grow in our schools really have to come from local effort, tax increases, or creative grant writing. So with this slide, we'll stay on this one, I just want to give you a brief overview of our project, which began with an extensive feasibility study. About 8 months, we put together a task force and really just started looking at what this kind of thing might look like for Middlesex County. And at that point, it wasn't even decided whether this would be a project for our schools or for our county. We looked at historical trends in energy consumption, price history, traditional power, modeling potential scenarios if we could lock in a rate through a power purchase agreement over the long haul. There really were three things driving us at this point, at the heart of our pursuit of this project. One would, of course, be the financial savings. The second would be learning opportunities that our kids would have, as Mark mentioned. There's a hands-on component that's pretty cool with these things being on site at the schools. And then finally, just being responsible stewards of our resources, the resources given to us by the county, as well as natural resources. The most important, probably not necessarily to me, I'll save for the end of my few minutes here what was most important to me, but I think probably most important to the project was the financial savings that we could realize for our county and for our schools. And when it came to those financial savings, there were really two things that mattered to us most. And the first was ensuring that we could see those savings without any kind of upfront investment. And that probably was the thing that hung up our feasibility study more than anything. As we would look at this, it just seemed like more and more of a no-brainer, but we just couldn't wrap our heads around that kind of benefit truly being at no cost to the school division. There's no such thing as that in the life of school finance, as you know. But truly, no upfront investment for the schools. And then the second was finding a partner that we really could trust, because in Virginia, we were a very early adopter embracing renewable energy. So we ended up partnering with Sun Tribe Solar. We went through a competitive bid process. We had members of the county and the schools, as well as parents in the selection process. This is a company based out of Charlottesville, Virginia. We did negotiate a power purchase agreement that has led to us paying 15% less per kilowatt hour for energy than we would have been paying with our traditional utility provider. Long term, that means over $4.7 million in savings for Middlesex County Public Schools, which is staggering. In the short term, it has meant tens of thousands of dollars that I have been able to reinvest back into our division right away. Next slide, please. So our project was done in two phases. The first phase was done behind Middlesex Elementary School. It's actually the picture that is behind me right now as I speak in my on my profile. And that project powered fully our elementary school and middle school. And it was never intended to do another phase, but the project was so successful and our experience with Sun Tribe so positive that it was actually my school board that came and said, when are we going to get to high school? And so we were able to bring them back to do a second phase, which is the picture that you see there. Those are the panels behind our high school that fully powers that facility as well. They're ground mounted units, obviously, as you can see. The first was completed in August of 2018, and then we were able to bring the high school on in December of 2019. Next slide, please. So this definitely was a community effort. As I shared earlier, our process began with a task force made up of school board members, board of supervisor members, division operations people, parents, and that same group was expanded later to participate in the selection process. And I will add that our community had really had a larger vision working towards revitalizing our central hub of our community. We were one of two in Virginia to get a pretty sizable revitalization grant. We have just onboarded electric buses this year through a program with Dominion Energy. We were building housing for affordable housing, attractive housing for teachers and deputies and others that sometimes it's hard for us to attract folks, especially younger folks, to a community like this. And then the revitalization of the county seat, really this project fit into that and enabled us not only to come together as a community, but to realize tremendous savings to further build trust with those that hold the purse strings for us during budget season, which we're in now. Next slide. So as Mark mentioned, I like the way he put this, the unintended consequence. We were just looking to save some money and be responsible, but really we have had some wonderful positive promotion through the press that we never would have expected. As you can see, we're in the Washington Post and NPR, PBS. This is a big deal for a little place like Middlesex County. So we've had a wonderful experience with that. And honestly, our experience has really been so positive, both because of the success of the project, but also just because of our ongoing relationship with the company that we've partnered with, SunTribe. It's a story that I really enjoy telling, and I look for every opportunity to share it with my colleagues, and have done so over the past couple of years since our project came online in 2018. I believe it's close to a couple dozen other divisions in Virginia have followed suit. Not only putting projects in, but putting projects in with SunTribe. So it's been unbelievably positive. And so this next slide is really the point that I'm most excited about. Probably my favorite part of the project, the hands-on learning opportunities that our students are given and our teachers have access to with these being on site. You can see there a couple of kids, they're right outside the solar panels behind the elementary school. And we had an Eagle Scout who came and did a project where he essentially put together pictures explaining the solar process and then posted them on these displays right outside of the project. And then there's another picture there. We have folks from SunTribe that come in and join our classrooms, speak to our students. There's a story I love to tell about being out there one day, and there just happened to be some second graders out there, and seeing the look in the students' eyes when they can hear the inverters, which are pretty quiet to begin with, but when they can hear the inverters slow down as they see a cloud pass over the solar arrays, that gives a really powerful exclamation point to what they're doing in the classroom through renewable energy curriculum. So really has been a positive experience for us. I guess the final slide really is a question slide, but I'll just end with this. I think what's really important for us, both for the concept of power purchase agreements, but also speaking to the relationship that we maintain with our provider, our community and our stakeholders have absolutely loved the process and the results of the process. Incredible positive feedback that we continue to get from school board members, community leaders, administrators, staff in the school themselves. It's what enabled us to bring SunTribe back to do a second project and has led to this being such a wonderful positive experience for us. So I've said a lot there and I want to respect time. I'm going to stop with that, Tish, and I'm certainly available to answer questions.
Great, thank you. And we'll have next slide. Next up, we'll have Dr. Trujillo with Tucson Unified School District.
Yes, I want to thank you for welcoming me here today. And I want to send a wonderful greeting from the heart of the beautiful American Southwest, all the way across our United States, from Arizona to Florida. I hope all of you are doing well. And our story is a little bit different. We never set out to make money. We never set out to make money because the mentality here in the heart of the beautiful Sonoran Desert, 86,000 beautiful square miles across the American Southwest and Arizona and northern Mexico. In our region, sustainability has always been a way of life, not something new, not a new educational trend, not a popular political talking point. Here, water is scarce, water is sacred, and energy is largely produced by the sun in a state that has over 300 sunny days each and every single year. So what our goal has always been as a school district, our vision has always been able to promote sustainability as just a way of life for the next generation of Arizonans, and to do so by providing learning experiences and learning environments that are embedded across the curriculum and the school day, and more powerfully, to be a leader and a model of environmentally sustainable behaviors as one of Arizona's largest employers and largest energy producing organizations. And this notion of, from the very earliest ages of our students starting in our system, even as early as kindergarten, really promoting and getting them used to the idea of sustainability, the concept that it's our interaction with the environment in a way that ensures that there's going to be enough of these finite resources like water and energy available for future generations and for a viable future for our beautiful state of Arizona. That's always been our goal. So that's like Dr. GRETZ before me, we experienced a byproduct of saving money. And that's always a positive. So with that, I'd like to kind of go ahead and begin with our story. Next slide. So currently, Tucson Unified School District, we're one of the largest school districts located in Southern Arizona, in the city of Tucson. We have increased now to full capacity. We operate 80 solar sites, which is the entirety of our district, with 23 megawatt capacity and 40.7 million kilowatts of power. Our solar panels produce 47% of the district's power. And that's absolutely amazing through our energy performance innovation project. Next slide. There's a snapshot of one of our largest sites. You can see the arrays up there powering McCorkle K-8 Academy, and we're very, very proud of this work. Next slide. We have an award-winning program here. We've been the recipient now a couple of different times for the Governor's Award for Energy Technology and Innovation for solar projects. And we are an Environmental Protection Agency Green Power Partner. Next slide. Some of the highlights, of course, we are one of the largest on-site solar generation projects in the nation, and we're the #1 K-12 solar producer in Arizona. We have seen over $5.2 million in savings since 2014. And that's been key for us because in our state, we are 47th in funding for public schools. So this allows our team to put money back into our regular maintenance and operation budget. We've been able to buy buses, we've been able to fix HVAC systems, replace uniforms for bands, purchase sports equipment, purchase equipment for the performance arts, instruments. So we've really been able to turn around and reinvest that money in the things that really make our district run. And also we've been able to put some of this money back into our teacher salaries. So it has been an unintended consequence, a positive consequence, positive benefit, I should say, very consequentially positive benefit to be a fully solar powered district. And of course, what I talked about, our larger mission and vision, is sustainability education for a new generation of Arizonans growing up in the beautiful desert Southwest. Next slide. It really is a celebration of our community coming together to make this happen. This has been a 3-year, actually now at this point, it's been a 5-year process to bring together 3 phases of the program together to be able to fund the third-party agreements. Largely have made that happen. They're very common here in Arizona, that have been able to defray a lot of the upfront costs for the arrays and the photovoltaic systems. We've been able to defray a lot of those costs thanks to those agreements to really get them fully installed, been able to pay for power at a significantly cheaper rate, and certainly have been able to turn around and put that money back into our district. And now our latest phase of this work, we're seeing a beautiful marriage between our solar initiative and our school community garden program. We are also, in addition to solar, we're also one of the largest school garden programs in the state of Arizona. Through the partnership with the University of Arizona, we operate school gardens on 16 campuses that affect 5,500 students and give them the opportunity to come outside several hours a day and to cultivate their own school community gardens. And what we've seen now is we're seeing now at least half of our 16 sites are either fully converted into photovoltaic gardens, where our solar panel arrays are now providing the power and the light to grow. They're either fully converted or they're in the process now of converting to photovoltaic gardens that now will rely on solar power to grow things like lettuce and corn and cucumber and tomato that will be able now to provide the produce necessary to sell at our community market. So it's a beautiful marriage between our long-established community garden programs and our solar initiative, further expanding the learning experiences and the learning environments that we want to provide for our students to promote environmentally sustainable, sustainably responsible behavior. So that's a little bit about the Tucson Unified School District's journey. We're excited about this new phase of our journey where we're converting all of our school gardens to 100% photovoltaic energy sustained gardens.
Dr. Trujillo, thank you so much for sharing your story. That's amazing. We've just heard from 3 amazing school districts talking about their solar journeys. And next we have Heaven Campbell from Sun, and she'll talk a little bit more about how you can take action in Florida.
Thanks so much. And wow, what powerful panelists we've had today. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I would like to, I don't know if this GIF is going to play, but if it does, I'd like to just reiterate what this means for schools. As we've heard, real life right now, we're talking about new teacher salaries, funding for schools, things like real life playgrounds and also STEAM playgrounds, right? Real life learning happening as they're looking at solar producing energy for their school. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have a few bills right now moving through our session. One of them is something that would help, like in Osceola's case, by helping to remove barriers such as a spending cap barrier that really excludes solar from the list of options for school as they're either being built or undergoing major renovations. So that is happening right now and is actually kind of moving. And then we have a resilient schools bill that would create a pilot program for PPAs for schools, as well as focusing on the storage portion, and a bill that is introduced that Solar United Neighbors is really helping to promote, that would legalize PPAs, not just for K through 12 schools, but also for colleges and universities, as well as municipalities, speaking to that next webinar that we're having that I know everyone's going to share. And open it up for the most growth for Florida. So what can we do right now? Well, thank you for attending today. It's so good to make sure that people are building education and awareness, because so many people don't know about this financing mechanism and what it could mean for our state and our schools. And then reach out to your legislator, reach out to your elected official and tell them that this is something that you support and it's worth them getting educated about. And we have a sign-on letter that we're going to send the link to as well. If there are organizations and schools, school boards to sign on to and make their voice heard. We just had Miami-Dade Public Schools sign on to this, one of the largest school districts in the country. And make sure that you're educating as well. Like I said, our campaign webpage has so many one-pagers, and not just one-pagers, but also the full report and a one-pager on the report, and it has webinars that you, including this one, we'll post it there, that you can share with them. So now I want to just wrap up so we have time for Q&A, because I know we've had a lot of questions, and we can start taking those. I think Jamie's going to lead us through those.
Okay, well, thank you, Heaven, for sharing how people can get involved. And thank you again to our amazing speakers. I know we had a lot of great questions show up in the Q&A, and some of them were answered already through that Q&A feature. I'll start with the one question that's open right now is, what's the length and years of a typical PPA for a school? What's the typical energy savings for a school in a PPA? And is there an option for the school system to purchase before the end of the PPA term? I assume the expectation is that the school would purchase the system at the end of the PPA term. So I'd love to have the panelists turn their videos and microphones on, so that way you can kind of jump in and join the conversation. I will say, you know, I've seen PPA lengths as short as 7 years and as long as 25 years. So it can really vary just depending on what the ROI looks like for you and what kind of contract you have negotiated. But we can potentially start with Dr. GRETZ or Dr. Trujillo if you want to speak to what your contracts look like.
Sure, happy to. Our first project was done for 25 years, and then the third one we did for 30 years.
So we did our first contract also for 25 years, and that's the one we're still currently in.
And in both cases, do either of you have in your contract that you will buy the panels afterwards?
Yes, we will eventually own the panels. And to answer the first part of the question, expected savings right now for us is averaging around 1.1 million a year.
Right. And then
Yeah,
for,
and
I know, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Dr.
Tish, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to me, I love the number, the big savings number for Tucson is 43 million over 20 years. So that's a big chunk of money that can go back into the school district. But I'll hand it to you, Dr. GRETZ.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is amazing. That is amazing. We, the first year of our first project, we saved just barely under 50,000. We're expected to do about 10,000 a year at the high school. And if nothing changes, if the cost of traditional power never changes, then we'd anticipate about 50 a year at the first project as well. I will say, just as a point of interest, I was really sold on this being a no-brainer, even if the cost stayed the same. It was just a break-even kind of thing. But even in that first year, the cost of traditional power where we are went up twice. So I think we can expect that to continue.
Great, thank you. And I'll start going through some of the questions got answered in the chat. I think there are common questions that are still worth bringing up. So John Patrick asked about, as a school board member, we are trying to move towards solar for our schools in a rural district. Our more senior school board members and county commissioners are hesitant to place these solar on our roofs, citing the huge investment in replacing these roofs on our older buildings. Do you have any suggestions to overcome this hesitancy towards solar for our schools? So I'm sure all three of you might have some suggestions as to, any doubters that you had to convince or any barriers they had to overcome to get this to go through.
So I'll be honest with you. We did have a little bit of a difficult time. So we had to leverage the neighborhood associations and win them over one by one in the city of Tucson. And so we literally had to go to each neighborhood association and kind of negotiate and talk about the benefits of what the cost savings would mean to the school and the larger vision, which resonates with Arizonans, the larger vision of sustainably responsible behaviors and teaching a new generation of youth what those behaviors are. Once we got that done, then it became the real nitty gritty. We don't want it on the playground, or we don't want the arrays here versus there. And the more you can make the community, the local school community, not just the larger district community, but you actually have to get in and go each local school, make them a part of the decision-making process, get them to buy in. It's great from a superintendent's perspective. It's great cover for your school board. They don't have to deal with the blowback. They don't have to deal with calls to the audience, people going to city council. That literally was the toughest part of this for us. Once we got that mapped out, it became a lot smoother. So as we started adding additional schools, we knew that we had to do that work up front. Go meet with the school site council, then meet with that neighborhoods association to get their buy-in, because the sticking point was literally, where are you going to put the arrays? And if you can work that out, you'll be okay.
And I love the photos that you shared and Dr. GRETZ shared that show some options, right, on where you can put them. Really, all three. We see rooftop, we see lunch canopy behind Mark, and we've seen some ground mounts as well. So I love that.
Yeah, thank you. We are getting close to the hour, so I'm going to combine a couple of questions that I saw in chat, mostly about financing. So we have Middlesex County and Tucson that have used PPAs. In Osceola, they self-funded the project. So couple of questions about bonds. So I mentioned in my presentation, we found in our research only 14% of solar capacity on schools nationwide were funded by bonds. I'll throw the question out to the panelists. Have you considered bonds? Why were PPAs more advantageous? Or are you using both techniques, both options?
I'll start with that. So we already have several large bond programs out. So our school district's position is not to bond ahead for solar, but we're doing that through other means. The main means is self-funding, and really we do that through closely monitoring our project reserves. Every project has project reserves for those unforeseen conditions that may come up, whether it's a site issue or some other building construction issue. So our approach is to really closely monitor those project reserves, so that when we get to a point in the project, the 50% mark of construction, and we still have our project reserves well intact, where we can redirect some of those project reserves towards the solar array. And I can tell you, on Neo City Academy, it was a competitive bid. It came in at $1.72 a watt. We were actually expecting somewhere north of $3 a watt. So very competitive, and keep in mind that solar prices continue to drop. The panels continue to get better, and the prices continue to drop.
Thank you.
In our case, I'll be honest with you, we haven't been able to pass a bond because Arizona really is a tough place to ask community members to absorb a tax increase. Arizonans do not like additional tax increases, like a lot of communities in America. And so we had to go this route just because our city already levies our community with a lot of taxes. And we typically do not do well funding public schools. Our community is more, they're more spirited about holding the legislature accountable versus shouldering a tax burden. So we had to go the PPA route. And quite frankly, big word for that, you know, it really is a great financial agreement for any district that can get one. You will recoup your money. You absolutely will.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. We have the same experience here in Middlesex. I would say that if, of course, economic landscape was a little different when we brought ours on board, but I would say if it weren't for the ability to enter into an agreement like this, we would not have been able to do this. No way.
All right, well, thank you so much for your comments. Unfortunately, we are at time, so we're gonna wrap it up here, and I'll remind everyone that we will have a recording and we will go through questions that you posted and see if we can answer some of them offline. But thank you so much for sharing your stories, and thank you, audience, for listening in and asking great questions. So I'll have one more reminder that on Thursday, we have another webinar like this, where we'll hear from 3 more amazing speakers, including the city of Orlando, which is a city that has a goal to be 100% clean energy. And we'll also be hearing from City of Atlanta and Macon-Bibb County in Georgia, which are 2 localities that have used power purchase agreements to go solar once there was legislation passed in Georgia to enable that to happen. So that's this Thursday, March 4th at 12 p.m. And we will wrap it up here. If we can go to the last slide. And again, thank you all for attending. We have contact information here. If you are a school district interested in going solar, we have resources on our website, Solar for All Schools. You can reach out to me through solarschools@generation180.org. Please reach out to Heaven if you're in Florida and you want to support this campaign to enable PPA legislation in Florida. SolarUnitedNeighbors.org or heaven@solarunitedneighbors.org is her email address. And thank you all for attending. Hope you have a great day. Thanks.